I want you to place, so Command-Shift-P, and in here, this is my assets folder. I've got this one iPhone scan. So actually what we're going to be doing is, I'll select both of these and bring them in and just show you, and then I'll walk you through it again. So you can bring in multiple images at one time. You see it says 1 of 2. If I click and then come over here and click, it will place both of them. And you can have a lot stacked on your cursor. What I wanted to show you here is we're going to recreate this image. And all I did was just sitting at my desk at work one day, I looked at this image, I bought this image from iStock and downloaded it. And then I just did a quick sketch on a legal pad that roughly represented that. Took a photo with my iPhone. I have a better phone now, so it takes much better pictures. But, you know, and then I just, you know, brought that into my computer, and then I'm going to use that for a template. So I want to show you how to do that. I'm going to get rid of this. So the point of this is you can do sketches and bring them in to your computer and then place them in Illustrator and use them as templates. So I'm going to bring out the layers panel, actually, is what I want to bring out. To make this into a template, drop-down menu and template. Now, a couple of things happen when I make it a template. One is, you see this little symbol here that says that this is a template. It automatically gets locked. You notice it all got lighter. So templates, one of the advantages of templates is they won't print. So anything that's been made into a template, you don't have to worry about because it's never going to print. And you can turn it on or off just the way you would any other layer by clicking here. All right, so that's going to be our template. It's locked. I want to create a new layer for the image. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and add a new layer. That brings up the layer options box, and I'll say original illustration. Say okay. Now this is where I'm going to place the illustration, high-res JPEG. You can just double click on it and place it. And I'll make it a little bit smaller so that it fits on my page. Hold the Shift key, bring it down in here. I'm going to lock this one and then make another layer, Option click, and this will be my illustration. I'm going to zoom in here on this one, and I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to reference my sketch. Illustrator, you don't hold the Option key. When I want to bring in this direction handle here, you just click on your anchor point and that pulls it in. Now I'm going to hit I for eyedropper and sample the color of the big head. I'm actually going to make mine a little bit lighter so that you guys can see it on screen better. See the difference. That's a little too much. Okay. Okay. Now what I want you to do is open up that layer and hide it for a minute. Just click on the eyeball, turn it off. And then with your pen tool, create the small head in here. Now you don't have to worry about it because I'm going to show you a really cool technique for trimming off elements. So this can hang out over the other head. You don't have to worry about it. Then I'll hit the I for eyedropper and sample the second head. And now I'll turn this back on and you have something that looks like this. All right, now we're going to use something called Pathfinder to trim this off. And we're going to be using our layers panel to make selections and then Pathfinder. Now with with an object selected like this, Pathfinder becomes available in the, let's get two objects selected. I'll select this one and this one. I'm going to hold the shift key and just click in the far right. So I've got the big head and the small head selected. Then Pathfinder becomes available right here. I'm going to open it up in here so that you can see it more easily on my screen. A little tricky managing the real estate with all these windows here. Okay, now for this to work though, we have to duplicate the big head. I'm going to rename this just so that we can keep track of it. I'll call this big head, and I'll double click on this one and call it small head. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate big head. Make sure nothing is selected at the moment. Select big head. Command C is copy, and Command F is paste in front. So you see what that did is that copied it and pasted it on top of the previous big head. So now I've got two big heads here. Let me make sure I've got this options panel as big as, wait a minute. There we go. Now you can see that a little better. Okay. Hold the shift key and select small head and then the duplicate of big head. And then we're going to use the Pathfinder here, and that will trim it off. Let's stop for a minute before we continue. I want to show you Pathfinder in a little more simplified version. So let's go, I don't need this one. Here. So I want you to create two ellipses like this. So you just be in here, ellipse tool, make a couple of circles. I'd like them to be different colors. Then I'm going to select them both just by marquing around them, and let's watch what happens when we choose different Pathfinder options. These down here are not very useful. They used to be, but they've changed the way they behave. So these are the ones you're going to use most often. So this first one will merge, and it'll use the color of the top object to apply to the final version. If I do Command Y, you're going to see that's no longer two circles, it's one single shape. Do Command Z. This one is minus front. So it's going to take this first object and where it's overlapping the, I don't know, greenish aqua color, and delete it. This one will be the intersection. So this will only leave this piece where they overlap. And this one creates a compound shape, which is basically a hole through the middle. All right, I actually don't need to see the iPhone sketch anymore, so I'll just turn that one off. Let's do the lips. We'll do the same sort of thing with these lips. I'll use the ellipse tool and option and drag around the mouth. Select the eyedropper to sample the color. Switch to my selection tool, which is V. Again, I have to duplicate the big head, because notice if I don't duplicate the head and then I do this, the big head disappears. So we need one version of the big head to remain, and then another one's going to do the trimming. So with this selected, Command C, copy, and Command F, paste in front. Hold down the Shift key and select the lips, and then intersection. Let's try something else. Let's try one of these pencils. So I'm going to do it just over here on the side. By the way, with Illustrator, you can use this entire board out here to create artwork and so forth. It won't print. Anything that's outside of this white area will not print, but you can create stuff out there and save it with your document, and so it's very useful. Okay, for the pencils, first of all, I'm going to start out just with a rectangle tool. I'm going to move over here so you can see the pencil. So let's say I'm going to create like this one here. So I've got the rectangle tool, and I'll create the face, or I'll call it the face of the pencil, and we could use I for eyedropper. I'll sample this. I can hold down the Option key and duplicate it. Eyedropper, sample. Go back to the Move tool, which is V. Option key, duplicate it. I'll move it over to the other side. Eyedropper, I, sample. And then V for the Move tool. I'm going to make these a little bit more extreme in color so that you can see them more easily. Something like that. Now the pencils taper. So an easy way to do that is take the direct select arrow, the white arrow. I'll zoom in here, space bar, pull it down. And I'm just going to marquee around the top of my rectangles, and that highlights or activates all of these anchor points. I'm going to hit S for scale. This is the scale icon here. So I'm now in the scale tool, and I can click and drag. And one way is going to go wider, one way is going to go narrower. See, that tapers it in. Tapered it way too much, but I'll zoom in so it won't go as extreme, hopefully. Okay, still pretty extreme, but you get the idea, hopefully. I could go the other way. One way makes it, you know, narrower, and the other makes it wider. Something like that. Feels pretty good. All right, I'm going to group these. All you have to do is do Command G. I want you to watch what happens in the Layers panel. Okay, so that put all of those into a group. You can twirl that open and see, like every path in Illustrator always exists on its own sub-layer. So we've got this layer, which is like a group in Photoshop, and then within it we have all of these sub-layers, and then we have this group, which then contains the sub-layers of the pencil. Now let's create that wood around the pencil top. So that would be, this is what I'm calling the wood. So with the pen selected, I want you to press Command U. So you can see this, in my case, magenta line. That guide is very useful. It shows you this is the middle of the object that I've got selected. So I could click and then come down and draw. I'll make my little scallops for the wood. Just click on it to get rid of that extra handle. I could use the eyedropper again to sample the wood color. And then I've got something like that. I'll take the ellipse tool and make an ellipse. Option key, Option, drag. Now this doesn't have to be a perfect circle. I'm going to sample, eyedropper, sample, I guess this color here. Now I want to trim it, so I have to select the wood, Command C, Command F, so I have a duplicate of the wood, hold the Shift key, and then click on the far right here, so I've got the ellipse and the wood selected. And again, this one's going to be intersect. That trims it off. We will be using some of these others later. Okay. I want to talk about gradients for a minute. So let's go ahead and save this illustration just so that we don't lose it. Okay, let's create a new page, and we're just going to look at gradients for a minute. Any size is okay. Move some of this out of the way. And I'll just take the rectangle tool, draw a rectangle. Now let's say we want to add a color gradient to this. I'm going to open up my swatches. This would be, your swatches would be available in your properties panel. I've also got, my color panel happens to be open, so I'll just choose a color over in here. You could also click on the bar down at the bottom. You could double click this, open up the editor. And in the properties panel, we should be able to see, let me open up properties. We should be able to see our fill here. And that will bring up whatever you've got selected here. Right now, this is my swatches. This would also open up the color mixer. Okay, now let's say I want to add a gradient. I could start by selecting one of the pre-existing gradients. Let's just start with a grayscale gradient right here. And then there's several tools that we use in conjunction with the gradient tool in Adobe Illustrator. One is the gradient panel. So my selection tool, I'll go up here, choose gradient. It is Command F9. Here's the gradient panel. And what you can do if you want to change colors is you can just double click on one of these color stops, choose a color, double click over here, choose a different color, and there you've got a gradient. In this panel, you can also choose the style, like we could make it a radial gradient or a free-form gradient. We'll talk about free-form a little bit later. Right now, I want to stick to these two. I think it'll be less confusing. Okay. Now we have another tool over here. See where it's hiding. Here it is here. It's hiding with the, mine was under the mesh tool. G, just G for gradient. And this brings up what's called the gradient annotator. That's this thing here. And with this, we can modify the gradient by pulling this in or out. We could rotate it. We can move where the center of this, in this case, we've got a radial gradient, so I could click here and move this around. We could also change the color here by double clicking on this and double clicking on this one. So forth. If I want to change it back to radial, I need to do that over here in the gradient panel. And now it's gone back to a radial. And with the radial here, we could rotate this, or you could just click and drag. This is similar to Photoshop because you can just click and drag anywhere to modify this. Anybody got any question for that? Somebody is unmuted here, or is not muted. I'm going to mute you. There we go. I'm just going to mute everybody so we don't get the background noise. Okay. All right, so now let's go back to our big head and see how we would apply this. So we're going to use it, first of all, to create this sort of a flower-shaped thing here. So I'll move over here. I'm going to start by using the ellipse tool. And we'll just create a basic flower. Now, I'm not going to make these. I'm going to show you later a technique where you can make this perfect as far as having a perfect circle with other circles perfectly distributed around it. In this case, I want it to be a little bit, less perfect. So I'm just going to kind of make it an ellipse, but not a perfect ellipse. And for right now, we can just make it any color you want. We're going to change it in a moment. So I'll just leave it with this. It doesn't matter. Now I'm going to add another ellipse right along the edge. These will be the petals. And then I'm going to, let me zoom in on this. I'm going to hold down the Option key and just copy this around. And you can change it a little bit if you want it to be a little irregular. You can rotate it so that it goes with the path a little better. So I'm deliberately making these slightly different so it has a little bit more organic, I guess you'd say, feel. Now I've still got the smart guides on, so you're seeing these magenta lines pop up all over the place. Command U will turn them off. So if they start bothering you, just Command U. All right, so right now we've got all of these separate sublayers. I'm going to select them all just by marqueing around it. Marquee around the whole thing, and then I'm going back into Pathfinder. Here it's over here, and click the first one, which is merge. Now all those sublayers disappeared, and we have one layer, one shape. Let me go through that again. So I've just got everything going all the way around here. Draw a marquee around the whole thing. First button in the Pathfinder, here's the Pathfinder, or over here. Click that, that merges it. Okay, we're going to add a gradient to this now. We'll add a radial gradient. And I'm going to just look at my reference. Okay, so it's going dark to light. We could also add a drop shadow to create that look. Let's go kind of the same way. We'll have light on the outside, dark on the inside. I'm just going to start by applying my grayscale gradient. I'll make it radial. This one actually has to be the dark green in here. So this one is not in color. Let's see. I'm going to open up my swatches because I want to show you something. I'll just open up the swatches here, because you can take your swatches and drag a swatch color to one of these stops. So actually I wanted to darken them inside, light on the outside. I'll drag this here. Something like that. And you can add more. Just this is very similar to Photoshop. We can just click here and add another one, and I could lighten this one up, say to something like that. Now, if you want to keep this, remember in Photoshop we would do new, and then it would add it to our presets. Here you can just click it and drag it into your swatches panel, and it will then add it to your swatches, and then save it with your document. Okay, now we're going to add some multiple layers to this. So I'm going to do Command C, Command F, and then just hold down the Option and the Shift, drag it in, and there we've got a little flower. You could rotate it if you wanted to, just to offset those buds a little bit, make it a little more interesting. I'm going to do one more, Command C, Command F, hold down the Shift and the Option and drag it in and rotate it. I meant to apply a drop shadow, so I'm going to select this. Well, I'll select the first one and we'll put a drop shadow in there. So that's under Effects, Stylize, Drop Shadow. Now I want the drop shadow actually to be more of an outer glow, which we could also do. We could do an outer glow, but we get the same effect by having no offset. So if this goes to 0 and this one goes to 0 and you hit Tab, offset should be 0. The blur I need to crank up, and I'll crank up the opacity. Something like that. I'll select the second one, add the drop shadow. It should use whatever your last settings were. Okay, let's take a look at our illustration. So in their illustration, they've got like a hole in the middle. They've got another ellipse. We've got 1, 2, 3, and then we've got an ellipse. We'll stick that one in, and then we'll punch a hole through the whole thing. So let's do that. Click in the middle. I'll go ahead and add the drop shadow to that one as well. And I'll move in here closer so you can see it. Okay, so we're going to use a clipping mask to punch a hole in this. The way the clipping mask works is you use the mask to reveal the part that you want to see. So in other words, if I want a hole in the middle of this, I have to create a mask that reveals all of this and doesn't reveal this hole in the middle there. So let me walk you through this. I'm going to go here to black with no stroke and make an ellipse. So I'm making a big ellipse that covers the whole flower. And I'm going to have to hide that one for a moment while I make the other one. I want to make this one in here smaller and try to get it kind of centered. And then turn this one on. Now I'm going to select both of these, hold the shift key and select both of these. And we should be able to, in the, sometimes it gives you the option over in the properties panel to do a compound shape, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to go to Object, Compound Path, Make. So basically this has punched a hole through this ring. And then I'll select all of it. Oh, I want to make sure that the, I want to make sure this guy is inside the group. All of this should be in a group actually. So I'm going to select all of these and group them. Because if they're a group, they're going to act as a single object when I try to make my mask, which is what I want. So I'll stick this over the top of them, select them both, and then clipping mask, make. So now you see I've got a hole in this little flower.